The leaders of China and Australia signalled an end to 6 years of diplomatic hostility after meeting at the G20 summit in Indonesia on Tuesday. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says his talks with Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping were a step towards a more stable relationship. It was the first meeting between leaders of Australia and China since 2016. Albanese says he raised the issue of Chinese tariffs and bans on Australian goods. Those restrictions have been in place since 2020, when Australia called for an inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. China is Australia's biggest trade partner and buys over $100 billion of Australian exports a year. Xi also acknowledged what he called difficulties in the two countries' relationship. He says China and Australia should work together to build stronger ties. To find out more about what the meeting means for the two countries and Taiwan, our reporter Staś Butler spoke to Australian think tank director Bryce Wakefield.
What's the significance of this meeting? What does it mean for Australia and for China?
Well, it's a thaw in the relationship between Australia and China. There hasn't been a significant prime ministerial level meeting since 2016 when Xi and Turnbull met. Some people in Australia are declaring this a victory for Australian foreign policy. I think that goes a little bit too far. It should be noted that there are still outstanding issues that are not resolved. And these are not likely to be resolved, but at least at the moment we have the two sides talking to each other. We can expect the relationship to be moving on a more even keel, even though there are significant differences in the relationship.
What should we make of the fact that the meeting between Albanese and Xi was only 32 minutes long compared to the Biden-Xi meeting, which was 3 hours?
Well, look, obviously, China sees the United States as a fellow great power. Australia is simply not in that category when it comes to power relations between the two countries. Australia is not China's first priority, although sometimes it may think it is.
Regarding that kind of triangle of Australia, China, and the United States, how much do you think Australia has bought into the United States' approach to China and the Indo-Pacific and to Taiwan?
Well, to some extent, Australia has bought into the US position on China, but to some extent it's also led the Indo-Pacific approach to China. You need to remember, for example, that it was Australia out in front banning Huawei, the telecommunications company, from having a stake in Australia's 5G network. And that was a position that Australia took before other powers. So in many ways, Australia has been a leader in that regard and has been sort of setting the tone for relations with other powers in the area.
And with regards to Taiwan, obviously, President Biden has now said on multiple occasions that the United States would intervene in a conflict. Where do you think Australia stands on that?
Look, the smart money would be that Australia would take its lead from the United States on that particular issue. If there was a conflict over Taiwan and it did involve the United States, it would be very hard to imagine Australia not becoming involved in some way, shape or form, even though there are many in Australia who do not believe that a war over Taiwan is vital to Australian interests.
Do you think that Australia would support Taiwan's bid to join the CPTPP?
It would be hard for Australia not to support Taiwan's bid to join the CPTPP. I mean, Taiwan is an outstanding member of the international community that adheres to the rules-based international order, even if it is not an official nation state in Australia's eyes. So one could certainly imagine Australia supporting Taiwan in that regard.